Kyle Wark is with the Research Department Southcentral Foundation from Anchorage, Alaska. He will discuss reflections on community-based participatory research in Alaska Native communities. And he was also on a panel yesterday, so please welcome our brother here.
So I was told that I had 12 minutes earlier, and now I just learned that I had 30, so I'll see if I can expand my presentation. So I realized after I submitted this that I probably should have changed the title. It's not so much about community-based participatory research, although I will speak to that. It's more about indigenous research methodologies to address the topic of the panel. So, gunal chisha dia din yat kasani kutkin katlaka ishu khatu asak yetnach deshitania chukanedi yadi kagwan tandachkan kunakawo khat kudzati hadakahidi we angun kwandach achoe ach tuasagu kwasatini isikuge achyu ktangi tlaike. Thank you all for being here, honored guests. My Tlingit names are Kuchtin Katlaka Ish. I'm a Raven from the Deshitan clan, the end of the Trail House people. I'm a child of the Chukanedi. My father was non-native, but he was adopted into the Children of the Tall Grass clan when he married my mom. My maternal grandfather is Kagwantan, the burnt wood clan. I'm very happy to see you all here. But do you understand my words? No? Ideally, I should give this presentation to you all in Tlingit. To understand what Indigenous research is, we ought to be able to embrace Indigenous languages and conceptualizations. Unfortunately, I don't speak Tlingit, and you don't understand it, so that hampers our ability to do that. How did it feel hearing me speak Tlingit? Maybe you're used to being in multicultural Indigenous spaces like we are here, where people share their language. Maybe it even felt good hearing me express myself in my language. But you can imagine how our ancestors felt encountering Western languages and cultures for the first time. It was very foreign to them. Their ability to express what they were thinking and what they were doing would have been very limited, and our worldviews were systematically dismantled by colonialist, genocidal policies. So we're talking about what was able to survive and resist colonization, boarding schools, etc. There's also 600 plus indigenous languages and worldviews in North America, 20 languages and cultures just in Alaska. So I'm presenting to you examples of indigenous research, but it's not like this is indigenous research. What is research? Well, according to the Code of Federal Regulations, the common rule, research is systematic investigations designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. Now, but that's not the only way to do research. Anyone who's taken up a new hobby recently, say rock climbing, did you get an R01 grant to explore rock climbing in your community? Did you conduct focus groups with rock climbers? Did you write a peer-reviewed article about your experiences rock climbing? No, but you did probably meet other climbers, you shared story with them, you engaged in experiential learning. There's a lot of different ways of gaining knowledge about something, and the formal way we engage in research in academia is just one way of doing that. Here's a healthcare research model. At the bottom is background info and expert opinion. As you move up through the pyramid, you get cohort studies, randomized controlled trials, and at the very top, we have systematic reviews and meta-analysis. So some observations about this. It's hierarchical knowledge. Certain types of knowing are seen as superior to others. There are specialized roles like experts. It's distinct from daily life. Again, we don't conduct randomized controlled trials in our daily lives. It's biased towards the written word, peer-reviewed articles and that type of thing. And it's highly mathematical in nature. It prizes meta-analysis and this type of mathematical understanding. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I'm a mathematician by my undergraduate degree, but that's just the way that this knowledge is structured. Here is, again, an indigenous research model. We don't have the medicine wheel up in Alaska where I'm from, but I actually heard a wonderful traditional healer, Rita Blumenstein, when I first entered graduate school in 2010, share the medicine wheel in her presentation. It's something that we can all learn from and understand. So here we have in white the North, mythic ways of learning and knowing, intellectual ways of learning and knowing, experiential ways, spiritual ways of learning and knowing, and in the center, integrated ways of learning and knowing. It's holistic knowledge. All quadrants are equal and necessary. We all need intellectual ways of understanding the world. We all need experiential ways of learning. We all have stories that structure our engagement with the world. It's disseminated throughout the community. No one person owns the stories that govern our lives. No one person owns the Raven creation stories, for example, from my own Tlingit people. It's integrated into daily life. It's biased towards verbal instruction, myths and stories. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just the orientation that we have. And it's not typically mathematical. It's not governed by numbers and statistics. Statistics are the bane of my existence. Here we can see a way of applying an Indigenous research model, and you can see the orientation is shifted. In different cultures, you can shift the order of the colors around. Here we have in the beginning, east, sunrises, a new dawn, childhood, newborns, a time of change, new ideas. In the center, it says advisory group, training of facilitators. On the outside, seeking safety in grandfather's teachings, sacred items, language. In the south, summer, maturing and growing into adulthood, transforming and integration, time to accept change and learn. In the center, it says the groups, seeking safety in traditional teachings, feasts, ceremonies. In the west, we have later adulthood, sunset, twilight, new awareness, time to prepare and finish things, focus groups, sharing circles, seeking safety in sweats. In the north, we have winter, old age, purity and wisdom, a place for healing, looking deep, understanding the wisdom that was given. Stop, listen. Data collection, data analysis, writing, seeking safety in singing, drumming, elders' teachings. In the center, Aboriginal peoples, elders, community, teachers. So here we see that symbolism is integrated into the model, the cycles of the day and night, the seasons, the human life from childhood through adulthood into old age. What did the pyramid add to the healthcare model? It was an abstract form that was applied to the learning, but it wasn't really shaping it. It was layered knowledge, but it wasn't hierarchical. All those pieces were necessary to have a complete understanding of the topic. It was inherently intergenerational and relational, and cosmic relationships were given voice. Of course, I've been discussing the differences between Western knowledge and Indigenous knowledge, but there are also a lot of similarities. There's a stable body of knowledge subject to modification over time. Honesty, inquisitiveness, and open-mindedness are prioritized. They're built on close observations of the world around us and pattern recognition. And learning about plant and animal behavior or cosmic cycles are very important. I'm talking about Indigenous research, but there's also decolonizing research, which is kind of a sister discipline. This is adopted from a healthcare model, but in the top it says initiation. Whose interests and agenda is the research institution established to promote? Who establishes the goals of the system? Who defines what constitutes appropriate knowledges and methods? How will Alaska Native and American Indian people benefit from participation in the system? Who says so? How will we know? Whose reality is depicted by the research? In what ways do research processes facilitate the voice of the participants? What authority does the research institution have for its inception, structure, processes, and outputs? Whose realities and experiences are legitimate in the research system? And who are the researchers accountable to? Who says so? How is the accountability demonstrated? Decolonizing research tends to be focused on the production of knowledge. It's primarily concerned with power dynamics. It's about creating space for Indigenous worldviews in Western institutions like universities. And it often hybridizes methods like integrating feminist theory and critical theory with Indigenous research methodologies. I'm not going to talk about our specific project, which Ryan did a really great job summarizing yesterday. I'll go into a little bit more detail here. We conducted a landscape analysis to begin with, talking to different departments within Southcentral Foundation, where I work. We're a tribal healthcare organization. The Elders Program organizes a traditional food donation program for elders, where they redistribute food directly to elders and serve them at community lunches. They maintain a garden for both food consumption and elder activity, physical activity, and they partner with a botanical garden for berry picking. Health education has a focus on healthy diets. They have a signature program called Dinner Makes a Difference that has food preparation demonstrations for members, community members in schools. They also offer plant starts for home gardening. SEF dietitians, their work focuses on specific topics like diabetes and blood pressure, but they also recognize the value of traditional foods and share The Foods We Eat, which is a traditional food guide with patients, which has recipes and harvesting guidelines. SEF Traditional Healing has a focus on spiritual dynamics of traditional plants. They're co-sponsor of the Dept Plant Symposium, which has elder speakers, workshops with practical tips around traditional foods. And they maintain a garden of traditional plants for teaching both practical tips of harvesting plants and the spiritual dynamics of harvesting plants. We spoke to our sister organization, the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, and their Healthy Communities Department. They do a lot of work with traditional plants. They also collaborate extensively with the Alaska Food Policy Council, or AFPC, who hosts an annual conference on food issues with a growing focus on Indigenous food sovereignty. AFPC also maintains a garden of traditional plants. Healthy Communities has been a co-sponsor of the Alaska Plants as Food and Medicine Conference for the last 6 years, and developed the Store Outside Your Door video series, which is online, where chefs demonstrate modern recipes for traditional foods, including Chef Rob Canine, who was at the expo yesterday. They also work with the USDA, I think it's the Food Distribution Program for Indigenous Indian reservations. We heard about that yesterday, where they replace items in SNAP food boxes with local and traditional foods like Kodiak Island halibut. And they also have their own food donation program for elders. We talked to an outside researcher who does a lot of photo voice work capturing Indigenous knowledge, so elder insights into how consuming traditional foods benefit emotional, spiritual, and physical health, and the Tundra to Table program, which created videos by kids for moms sharing community knowledge about plants and nutritional content. And we also talked to an outside researcher that was involved in a lot of the project and programs that we just described above. He worked with ANTHC and SEF on the Alaska Plants and Food as Medicine Conference, and that became the Dept Plant Symposium, and helped develop the Store Outside Your Door video series. He spoke to an increasing alignment between Western medicine and traditional plant knowledge. Even the cancer drug tamoxifen came from Northwest Coast medicinal knowledge of yew tree bark, he said. So we can see there's an emphasis on supplying elders with traditional foods, and importance on traditional foods to healthy diets. The role that gardening can play in both supplying healthy foods and promoting physical activity, even in Alaska, using conferences like this one to share information about traditional foods, and how multimedia, especially video recordings, can be leveraged to promote sharing information about traditional foods. Based on that landscape analysis, we invited all the participants to be members of our community advisory board. They all said yes. And they pointed us to hosting a conference for our intervention for the CIHI, which we held just a couple of weeks ago. We had 27 workshops with 38 speakers, 150 people in attendance. We had workshops on protecting Indigenous knowledge, respectful harvesting, health benefits of traditional foods, food security and food sovereignty. It's all well and good to say traditional foods are good for us, but if you can't actually harvest them because the regulations are closed, then it doesn't do you any good. Spirituality and traditional foods, hands-on workshops, making traditional medicines and teas, gardening, elder stories of growing up with traditional foods. We also, like this conference here, had catering featuring traditional foods and local foods. So this was not Western research. It wasn't systematic or generalizable, but it did follow the principles of Indigenous research methodologies. It was holistic, intergenerational, relational, spiritual, mythic. It was also following a decolonization framework. It gave space for Indigenous knowledge to thrive. And that was partially accomplished by following community-based participatory research frameworks, especially through our CAB, who selected the intervention as a conference format, identified topics, nominated speakers, drafted the targeted invite list, and provided input on the evaluation forms. With that, I'll go ahead and close out. Thank you.